Morning to you.
Good morning.
There were something like 64 recommendations in this review. The government's taken them all on board. Do you applaud that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, look, the review does an awful lot of just carrying on what we've already done. And if you look on the actions point in the first pages, it lists a whole load of actions. Nearly every single one is actually a programme started as way back as 2022, 23. The big warhead replacement, they talk about the nuclear, the 15 billion, that was started under me. The AUKUS submarines was started under the Conservative government with the big announcement with the Prime Ministers and the Presidents. The extra £6 billion munitions was things. So you sort of know that the government's slightly in trouble because what they're really trying to do is, I'm afraid, paper over the very difficult crack that says they haven't put the money up. And this review tries...
They intend to, though.
They have an ambition.
They've put up 2.5%, and the ambition, you're right, I pressed John Healey about that earlier on, but nonetheless, they aspire to get to 3% of GDP spending by the end of the next Parliament.
Yeah, that would be about 2035, 2034. That is way beyond what both NATO and the US are calling for, and it's actually way beyond what really the authors of this report are calling for. The authors of the report themselves say, for this to be realistic, this has to be 3%. And the simple reality is the report quite rightly sets out the range of threats that we face, which are pressing and urgent. And then the government, as opposed to the report, starts talking about announcing new submarines in 2045. You know, that is not really a message to Moscow.
But you can't turn on a sixpence and say, well, now we've announced this, tomorrow we're going to be able to defend ourselves against it. It's going to take some time, whatever, isn't it?
Yes, so I have said 3% by 2030, and that is a sustained increase. You know, we know that this review had one hand tied behind their back, because from the very beginning, the Treasury said no more than 2.5%. Now, 2.5% of GDP is only 0.2% more than we are spending, when we left office and are spending now. So not a significant increase at all. Not going to touch the sides, given cost pressures, unfunded pay rises that the Treasury have put on, unfunded extras as well, and the cost of defence inflation. So it's got to be a proper pathway to 3%. If you don't do that, this report will be like many other defence reviews. It will end up hollow with lots of promises and nothing delivered.
Well, let's talk about the last one that was done in 2021, admittedly updated when Liz Truss was Prime Minister. The focus then, under the Boris Johnson government, was on the Indo-Pacific. That feels like
it does.
Looking in the wrong direction. Well, especially as, prior to that, Russia had already annexed Crimea, so there wasn't enough attention paid.
No, I wrote the report, right? So it wasn't just about the Pacific. There was a talk about Indo-Pacific tilt, and it is absolutely the case that the world's growth of GDP is in the Pacific, and it is in the United Kingdom's interest to be part of that and protect our trading interests.
So that wasn't wrong
as well. It's still not wrong. I mean, if you look at the two adversaries in the world we face, it's China and Russia, and it's very important that Britain invests in its allies in the Pacific. And right now, this government and the former government, they have sent the carrier group to the Pacific, right? It's not tootling around the North Atlantic. But we also actually, and this is when you know a government's slightly in trouble when it resorts to spin rather than reality, the actual biggest increase in defending since the Cold War was under my stewardship, 2019 to 2024-25. We increased, we were spending £17.5 billion in cash terms more at the end of our time than when we started.
And Labour would say you created a huge black hole in the finances, and of course that was the decade of austerity.
We all know the Labour black hole is the black hole rather than the actual.
But, nevertheless, it's a choice between warfare and welfare, isn't it? And you would choose warfare.
No, it's actually a different choice, I would say. The choice is, if you're going to spend more money on defence, you either cut something else...
Yeah, what would you cut?
Or you put up taxes, right? Now, if it was me, and I'm not the Conservative Prime Minister or the Conservative leader, in that choice, to leaders to choose, I would say, look, hang on, our welfare bill, our public sector pensions bill, our overall bill is half the public spending, right? If you add the NHS, welfare, public sector pensions. And by the way,
but it did get bloated under your government's watch,
the public sector pensions has grown over decades. The liability of this country of public sector pensions is £2.3 trillion, right? So we should really be asking ourselves, what is more important across the board? It may be you spend something less.
But hang on a second. Why weren't these questions asked?
They were
a year ago or prior.
No, they were. I mean, I don't know where you've been, but if you see Boris Johnson, if you remember, cut foreign aid. He was the first to cut foreign aid to increase the defence
Yes, but
budget.
I'm talking public sector pensions, and like you say, the huge
I think that's
burden
the challenge
that is.
for any government. This is not. This is the challenge for the next generation.
Not shirk the challenge.
No, our government changes. Remember the pension retirement ages, right? And that was something that was quite bold and brave and was not liked, and many people went on strike about it.
Yeah.
You know, and if you remember, they increased, and that wasn't just the state pension age. That was the pension of when people start to get it.
However, the triple lock remains in place, and a lot of people saying that should be looked at again in terms of pensions. It's just too expensive.
Yeah, I think what you're rightly setting out is there are lots of places you could go if you wish to raise more money for defence, or you can put up taxes. And that is, you know, to lead us to choose. That's the job of a Prime Minister. He's going to have to make those choices. But the Prime Minister is saying to everyone, you know, defence is pressing. We want to send a message to Moscow. It's real. You know, we have to prepare for war to keep peace. They're saying all these tough messages, and they're not following through with the tough decisions. You know, you have to be brave in leadership. You're going to have to make some of those decisions. There is no pain-free way to get to 3%, right? And if you tell everyone everyone's a winner, you're misleading the public, and they're not going to be. So we have to be brave and say why it's important. But, you know, you can see that with the caveats the government puts on. You know, and it's not just this government. You know, Rishi Sunak used to talk about it, which is the when economic conditions allow. Well, we don't say that about the NHS. We don't say that about education. We don't go, we'll give the NHS more money every year when economic conditions allow. The security of this nation is number one. It's really important.
But just to finish off, Ben Wallace, because of your experience in that role, I read your comment piece earlier with Grant Shapps, and you talked about the rhetoric not reflecting the reality. You've been there yourself when you present this plan and then it gradually gets chipped away at and eroded. Does the money just need, like you say with the NHS, need to be ring-fenced 3% and 3%?
You need to never stop fighting into the centre for your share as a Secretary of State. Whatever department you're in, if you have a case to make, you have to never stop fighting. And what it often boils down to is the simple relationship between a Prime Minister, a Chancellor, and a head of a department. And, you know, I think John Healey is a pretty straight guy, right? I think he absolutely wanted this money. He knew it was key to his review, and unfortunately he didn't get the money. And that's not his fault. We have to take into account the Prime Minister to match actions to his rhetoric.
Ben Wallace, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.